All right, what is up, everybody? I am so sorry. I am running late. I had to catch up on some emails and some stuff that I'm working on, which hopefully you guys will get to see later this week, but I lost track of time, so I'm so sorry about that. So today, obviously, the big thing is John Lynch got in front of a camera. So John Lynch was, of course, asked questions about the quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo. So I just want to start by saying, before I give my take on this, I completely understand why people are fed up with hearing about this and why people are ready to move on and why they don't want to hear any of the GM speak and the coach speak. Like, I completely understand that. And I'm not sitting here saying, I'm not going to come from a place of, well, you don't understand why they're saying this and that. That's not at all what it is. I get it. It's frustrating. It should have been handled a long time ago. I think that there's a lot of culpability on the organization's fault for allowing it to get to this point. So before I give my take, I just want to make it very clear that I understand anybody feeling well within their right that they are just annoyed with this and they don't want to hear it anymore. So having said that, this is my whole take on it, right? So John Lynch was asked pretty much, I'm just going to, cliff note this. I have the exact quotes, but we'll pull those up later. Let's just start by, cliff noting this. He basically was asked, would they release Jimmy Garoppolo? And his response is pretty much, no. Well, I don't foresee that happening. That's the key word too. We need to come back to this. We're going to dissect this. We're going to all break this down together. Please, if you're in the chat, share your thoughts. This is going to be as much about me giving my take as much as it's going to be a venting session for people who are fed up and upset with this. So please share your thoughts as well. But we need to dissect this as a group. So he said, I don't foresee that happening in regards to Jimmy being released. That's a very careful avenue of denial in the future, in my opinion, because, hey, maybe they do cut Jimmy and he can fall back on it and say, well, I didn't foresee it happening. Kyle Shanahan said he didn't know who was going to be alive on Sunday. He couldn't guarantee that. So I think the choice of words is very important to keep track of when they're doing these things. And again, I understand it gets frustrating when it feels like every base is attempting to be covered and we're not really hearing a lot. But I do think that that word is extremely important in the grand scheme of things, because he didn't say, no, it won't be happening. No, I'm not going to do that. He just said, I don't foresee that happening. So having said that, I can understand why John Lynch would have said this, right? If we're looking at this, they're clearly still trying to get some kind of value for him. As somebody who expected them to get something in return for him, I can't sit here and completely condemn them for believing that they can get at least some kind of draft compensation for a quarterback that won a decent amount of games and was better than a lot of alternatives that do exist out there today. The problem is, when is that going to happen, right? So my whole thing is, like, John Lynch stands nothing to gain from coming out and saying, well, yes, we'll cut Jimmy Garoppolo, we'll get rid of him. Like, that doesn't do any good at this point, even if it's probably one of the better outcomes that could come from this at this point. There really is nothing to be gained from John Lynch coming out and just flat out saying, well, yeah, if we can't get anything in return, of course we're going to cut him, because they have to maintain some kind of, even if teams like see through it, they have to maintain some kind of belief that they have leverage if they're going to engage in trade talks down the line, right? So again, I can understand why he's not coming out and flat out saying, well, yeah, it's on the table, or, all our options are here, or whatever he's going to say. They still need to come from a position of not only trying to pump up Jimmy's value or their perceived value of him to other teams, because again, if you know somebody's going to get rid of something for nothing, why would you give up assets to acquire it? And it's no different when you're talking about transactions in the NFL. So again, it's kind of just like a posturing thing. And I think it's just more of like 49ers fans are fatigued with the whole discussion in general. So they're kind of at the point where it's like, dude, like, please, like, let this just be over with. I'm sick of this. But again, I understand it. Like, John Lynch can't really just come out and tell people, like, yeah, well, when his shoulder's healthy, we don't want to give him $7.5 million for nothing, because not only does it not look good for the trade talks, it doesn't send the best message to the locker room. It doesn't look good from a PR standpoint. So this is where it gets interesting, right? Because I can understand why John Lynch is in the position he's in and why he's saying the things he's saying. And I get it, man. But I'm not going to sit here and say I feel bad or I empathize or I can, oh, poor guys answering all these questions, because unfortunately this is the result of them being indecisive and them not making a move sooner and making this decision with a little bit more swiftness, in my opinion. So it's kind of something that was brought on themselves. So I don't sit here, like I'm not sitting here playing the violin for John Lynch or this front office, but I am also understanding of why they're saying what they're saying, if that makes sense. So it's kind of this, like the way I worded it earlier was, I'm like, man, it's really just an unfortunate situation. And a lot of that does have to do with the situation that the front office helped create with all this mess. Like they have a part in this. I'm not going to sit here and act like everybody involved is a blameless victim. But unfortunately, like if we look at this, fans are sick of this. They want to move on. Nobody wants to have quarterback controversies or quarterback turmoil or any of that stuff. Jimmy Garoppolo probably doesn't want to sit here and deal with this stuff every day and know that he's probably not starting. Trey Lance doesn't want to have to worry about this and have to worry about, the quarterback circus that they went through and all the outside noise that he's already had to deal with. Like he was drafted to be the guy, and fans don't want to deal with this. So if we're sitting here, nobody is really winning at this point. And that to me is the most unfortunate part about all of this, is that it's kind of just this like dragged out scenario where we're stuck now. And this isn't going to change likely until that shoulder heals up, which I believe was like 4 months from the time of surgery. So it's probably going to drag out until the middle of summer, all the speculation and wondering and all that. So, we'll open it up a bit too. If you guys have some thoughts, I would love to share your opinions. Maybe we can touch on it a bit. So in the chat, please drop it. I'll go scroll back to see if there's anything. We can talk about some of the other stuff he said as well, but to me, it just creates this unnecessary quarterback drama that didn't need to be there. And to me, like I've said on previous streams, for those who didn't see it, to me, it almost would be worth just eating the $7.5 million injury guarantee to free up whatever cap space is left. But more so than the cap space, just to absolve yourself from this drama and free the fan base, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. It's like everybody's kind of stuck in this like awkward, like, you know what it's like to me? It's kind of like being stuck in an elevator in a very uncomfortable situation. Like you're not going anywhere. Like imagine getting stuck in an elevator with a bunch of people that maybe it's not like you don't like them, but it's extremely uncomfortable for all parties involved. And that's kind of where the 49ers are at. Like that elevator is not moving for 4 months and everybody's kind of just like stuck in a holding pattern until then. So at this point, like, what can the 49ers really do? Like, maybe behind closed doors, like we're seeing these reports where they're telling Trey Lance, he's the guy, he's the one that they're putting all the chips on the table for. We're still, backing what we did when we moved up and invested 3 first-round picks and a third to get Trey Lance last year. So the problem is that like the fan base doesn't get that kind of placation. And I know a lot of times people throw around like, oh, the team doesn't care what fans think. They're going to do whatever. Well, guess what, dude? When your business is built on fan engagement and people buying into your product, like you have to consider their emotions and their feelings and their outlook as well. Sure, it's not going to drive their decision making, but it has to be factored in. And I think that that's something that needs to be addressed a little bit better. I think the 49ers front office is really good for a lot of things they do, but I do think that that's the thing that they've made the mistake with the most during this whole process, is that they told the fan base one thing when they made all those picks when they mortgaged all those picks to move up and get Trey Lance, but yet they're still sitting here a year later, over a year after that trade was made, talking about how Jimmy's too good of a player to let go and how he's going to be playing for us or playing for somebody. And John Lynch talks about how competition brings out the best in people. And like, it's created such an unneeded headache. And to me, it's getting to the point where maybe it's just because I'm getting tired of talking about the same quarterback stuff all the time. But again, it's like, it's almost like it's worth just moving on for the sake of like freeing everybody, like eat that $7.5 million and just wash your hands of it and move on. Like, to me, that's what I would have done. I said that 2 weeks ago. I said that a week ago. I feel it even stronger today. That's not going to happen. And I understand that. So now we're just, again, stuck waiting, trying to see what happens. So the only other way that I think we can look at this too is that, like, hey, if they do keep Jimmy Garoppolo and he does come to camp and Trey Lance can't beat out Jimmy Garoppolo in a quarterback competition or whatever they want to word it as, that's concerning. I don't see any reason why that would play out that way. I think Trey Lance is a great talent. I think that he has everything it takes to be a starting quarterback. But again, it just comes back to like this unneeded drama where you don't see, like, any kind of consistency with the wording and the actions. Like if the 49ers really believed in Jimmy Garoppolo that much, they could have invested a good amount of money into a high level backup that could have, maybe they weren't as good as Jimmy Garoppolo, but there's plenty of guys that could have invested in that would have been able to kind of steer the ship if Jimmy were to get hurt. They talked about how, part of the reason we traded for Trey Lance was because we needed to have insurance and insulate the quarterback room in case of injury. Guess what? You could have done that, and you could have taken an impact player at 12. You would have a first-round pick this year. You'd have a first-round pick next year. So to me, it's kind of like they knew that it was time to move on and make an upgrade, but they're still like reluctant to do so. And this like half in, half out approach has really been creating drama that just doesn't need to be there. And sure enough, hey, September could roll around. Jimmy's off the team. He's cut. He's traded elsewhere, and none of it matters because Trey Lance is starting. But here we're sitting in the offseason. Like the NFL is a 365-day-a-year business. Like the NFL offseason is as intriguing and compelling to a lot of the sports fans in the sports world as, regular season NBA games, baseball starting up. Like there's a bunch of stuff going on, but these storylines are still happening every day. And instead of controlling the narrative with their actions, they're allowing the speculation to run rampant because they just can't let this guy go. So I don't know if you guys have some thoughts on that. I'll try to get to some of those if we see. There's some other stuff John Lynch said today too, but I'm going to try to get to some of the comments. Thank you for everybody who stopped by. If you are new and popping in, I really appreciate any subscriptions, likes, all that stuff. I'm less than a week into this, so we're just getting started. I'm trying to do streams every single day for as long as I can. So we'll talk about something. So I'm going to get to the chat real quick. Jamal giving me a hard time about being late. Again, apologize for that. My guy John Banks is in here. He's from Bills Mafia. We'll definitely be talking some Bills stuff later in the offseason. Rich giving me a hard time about being late too. Thank you for understanding. Let's see. And yes, real quick too, if you guys didn't know, Kiana Martin is leaving. I believe she's going to MLB TV. So congratulations to Kiana. For those of you who know, she does fantastic work as the 49ers senior team reporter. So congratulations to her. I wish her nothing but the best. She has just been fantastic in everything that she does. So I know it's really tough. A lot of 49ers fans are sad to see her go, but the utmost congratulations to her. And again, wish her nothing but good things on her journey, and hope everybody in MLB TV takes care of her and treats her well. Let's see. We got Jesus in here. Jesus is the Trey Lance of this channel. If you guys did not know, he is the franchise. So this is something interesting we can talk about. Think about to last season, right? The whole narrative that got spun around a bunch was that like the Niners had to start Jimmy, and they were only starting Jimmy because they wanted to boost his trade value. And it wasn't because he was so much better than Trey Lance. It was just because they wanted to pump up his value. Like, to me, I don't think that was ever a thing. Like, the only way I can look at that is maybe they needed to like prove that he could stay healthy for a full season, which unfortunately he couldn't do. He played the majority of games, but teams had 5 years of game tape on him, 4.5 years worth of starts of game tape on him. They had tape on him going back to, his preseason and his spot starts in New England. Like most NFL teams, scouts, front offices, players, like they know what Jimmy Garoppolo is. And I don't think anything he would have done this year would have really warped his trade value too much. He could have gone and the Niners could have won the Super Bowl. And I don't think that means that all of a sudden the trade value skyrockets, because at the end of the day, teams are still going to look at like, okay, there's the dominant run game. This pass rush is ferocious. This is a tremendous roster. So I think that this is an interesting point because it's almost like it only could have made the trade value worse. Like, I don't think there was ever a chance it could have increased, but you could argue it did get worse, or maybe more teams were like, hey, 2019 could have been a little fluky. Kyle just knew he had a strong team, didn't want to throw the ball a ton. There were some spots where they had to throw the ball this postseason, and it frankly was not pretty. And I think that definitely could have factored in to maybe lowering the value a bit. But to be truthful with you, I think that his value has always kind of been what it's been. I think there's guys that are worse than him that are starting in the league, and that's where I thought value would be there for him. But I also think that there's plenty of teams who recognize that it could be a product of scheme. It could be a product of like, for all the criticisms Kyle Shanahan gets from fans, he's very highly regarded amongst NFL circles. And I could see a very plausible scenario where other NFL teams are like, man, Kyle maxed this guy out, doesn't want him anymore. What the heck am I going to do with him? I'm not going to take this burden on. If Kyle Shanahan doesn't want this guy and doesn't think he's good enough, why would I want him? So that's an interesting point to talk about. Justin makes a good point too. I don't think that they would have told you that they foresaw DeForest Buckner getting traded. And so when John Lynch goes, I can't foresee us releasing Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, to me, it's a very, I think John Lynch would be a fantastic politician if he ever wanted to enter that line of work. He is really good for all the faults he gets as a GM and people give him a hard time. Part of that job is navigating the media. And he's really good at sidestepping questions and covering all his bases. And I get that that's frustrating for people. I'm not trying to sit here and act like that's something that people should be rooting for, but it is part of the job. And he is really good at that. And that's why when you break down his quotes, those little words here and there make all the difference in the world. Because again, I think people interpreted these quotes today as, I'm not ever going to release Jimmy, or we won't release Jimmy. That's not happening. He just said he doesn't foresee that happening. Plans change. Things are fluid. Again, I'll always come back to Kyle's like, I can't guarantee who's going to be alive on Sunday. Like, these guys don't mince words. They're very good at what they do. Emiliano wants him cut. He says scalpel's out. It's time to cut him. Let him loose. BSE says they are going to cut him eventually. Jamal sees it. Yeah, foresee is a very intentional word. Again, I promise you, John Lynch, this is not his first rodeo. He's sitting there, in the team hotel or the hotel out there in Florida before he's going to these press conferences, rehearsing his answers. He knows what questions he's going to get asked. And again, this is not unintentional. And John Lynch is very good at what he does when it comes to covering all his bases. This does need to get addressed real quick because they never said that they got first round picks. So I don't know, Mark, if you're referencing like they as in the report coming out of Pro Football Talk or they as in the 49ers. The 49ers never indicated that they had multiple second round picks. And to be honest with you, that never really made sense to me either, because if a team was going to give them multiple second round picks, I think they would have jumped on that in a heartbeat. So it never really added up. And to be honest with you, I'm not in a position where I like taking digs at other reporters or other, people that work in this industry. But I have noticed there have been some times where there's been reports from Pro Football Talk about the 49ers that don't necessarily add up. So when those reports came out, I didn't think it was too accurate. So yeah, it makes sense that John Lynch would say it didn't happen. John Lynch also came out and said they never got a concrete offer. And I think when he says that, there was never a formal submitted offer that, they could have accepted. I'm sure there was talks and teams offered certain things and offered, speculation of, well, what if we, there was definitely some sort of banter like that. I just don't think there was an official offer, and there certainly was never an offer for 2 second round picks. And I think that was something that just, again, got overblown. BSE's right here saying it too. That was a Florio report. So it never really added up. And yeah, Jesus, they never had any formal offers for him. Again, it makes sense when you think about it, because I think the Niners would have moved on for something if they would have got it in return. And a lot of it, I think, does have to do with the fact he can't pass a physical right now. Teams, I know that for a fact, the Colts, after speaking with Nate Atkins, I keep doing that, man. Nate Atkins of the Indy Star, the Colts were interested in Jimmy Garoppolo. And Nate told me during the combine, before free agency opened up, before all this Jimmy talk opened up, Nate told me, he's like, the only thing that I would be concerned about with a deal not happening is that the Colts really do want to revamp the offense a little bit. They want a quarterback who can come in and throw during OTAs, throw during camp, and do all the things that right now Jimmy can't do. And even with training camp, it's kind of a question mark. If he has a setback with that rehab process, he might not be able to throw during training camp. So there was interest in Jimmy the player, Jimmy the leader. The problem was that there were some teams that were reluctant to give up capital now, not knowing what they were getting in return because of that injury. So I think that injury, and I'm somebody, I said a couple times, I don't think the injury is that big of a deal. I think it's a pretty cut and dry procedure. They have a clear timetable for recovery. I don't think it'll be a huge deal. I completely was wrong on that. I completely overestimated the value that Jimmy would have as a starting quarterback. It is what held up a lot of this. So I gladly, take the L on that one. That's one I misread. There were teams that like Jimmy Garoppolo and were willing to trade for him. They just did not feel comfortable doing it with the shoulder surgery. So it comes back to the timing of it gets interesting. It gets kind of, I don't like throwing around conspiracy theories or, cryptic, sub narratives and stuff like that. But it is interesting now, if we go back and look at the timing of the procedure and all that it did end up having the impact it did. I still don't believe it was like an intentional move or something where Jimmy and his camp were so petty that they were, like it hurt his own trade value. So I don't think it was on purpose, but it does make the timing of everything a little bit interesting. Let's see what Dawson said. Hey man, I respect it. I understand it. I'm getting a little tired of quarterback stuff too, but I'm also trying to, stay on top of it. I know this is something that a lot of people want to get to the bottom of. And again, as much as this is for me to share my thoughts, I want to see as many opinions on this as possible. Let me know where you guys are at with this, what you want to happen. I'll throw it up on the board here. We'll talk about it. This is as much about you guys as it is me. This is supposed to be a group, I don't want to say therapy session because it's not like a tragic event happened, but this is supposed to be a group setting where we can all hash this out together. So I get it, Dawson, but unfortunately, somebody's got to talk about it, and I got to get content up every day. So I have not seen this yet. Man, I really hope it doesn't come to that. If Jimmy's still on this roster during Labor Day, then it's going to be a very long offseason. We're going to get a lot of narratives out of training camp that don't need to exist. You're also going to be in a spot where if you're taking away first team reps from Trey Lance and he has a slow start to the season, even if he wins the starting job, you're going to have this discussion about, well, did taking away these first team reps during training camp affect Trey Lance's development? And at this point, like, the guy needs as many reps as he can get. Like, it just keeps coming back to, like, it makes no sense to keep the guy on the team still. Like, unless he's willing to, restructure and take a pretty sizable pay cut to stay on, it doesn't make any sense to me to do it. And I just don't know why they're having such a hard time letting him go. It just feels like it's something that like what, unless they are able to come back and get a mid day 2 pick, like a second or third round pick in exchange. To me, like, hey, if you hold out till August and you get a 5th round pick in return, like, is it worth the headache and the speculation and all the things that are going to happen in the next 4 months? To me personally, no. And that's the decision the 49ers seem pretty content with. They're like, hey, for us, we're willing to wait this out. And to a certain extent, I applaud their willingness to not deviate from the plan. But at the same time, I understand why fans are getting so frustrated the more and more we go. Yeah, there was never a formal offer, Shardall. We don't know for sure about that, but it does seem like there was interest, and I do know that for sure. I have confirmed that there was interest from people who I trust very closely and who are very close to other teams. So there was interest, but again, interest is such a broad, generalized term that I understand people. It may not mean a lot to some people, but there was a decent amount of interest before the shoulder got thrown into the mix. So who knows if he would have fetched a high draft pick, but I think the trade would have happened. This is just, again, my own opinion. I think a trade would have happened if the shoulder wasn't a problem. But again, it just comes back to, like, I thought they would get rid of the guy last year. I thought it would be a clean break. They'd get a rookie. Maybe they'd bring in another veteran to push Trey Lance. Lance would start. They kept Jimmy. They got pretty close to going to the Super Bowl. They had a pretty successful season by most measures. So I can't fault them for that. But the fact we're sitting here again in another offseason, and this is happening again, it's Groundhog Day. I can see this all playing out the same, if not worse, because it's year 2 now. The thought of it is just driving me nuts already. So I'm kind of there. Mr. Carter thinks that Carolina or Pittsburgh gets him. I think Pittsburgh made it pretty clear they like Trubisky. I think with Trubisky, it's kind of just like a low. You don't have to give up draft capital. I think in the right system, he can be a pretty decent quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to go out and light the league on fire, but I think he will be better than what we saw from him in Chicago early on. So maybe Carolina does make sense to me just because Sam Darnold was awful. He's been awful for a few seasons. I just don't think he's an NFL starting quarterback. And Jimmy, for all his faults, has at least a track record of somebody that is better than Sam Darnold in my eyes. So Carolina needs to win now on the basis, like, Matt Rule and that front office are on the hot seat. Like, they, to me, are on the hottest seat right now of any coach in the league, any front office in the league. So maybe they look at a scenario where they can flip a player or flip a future pick for Jimmy and bring him in. The problem with that, though, is that they guaranteed Sam Darnold's $18 million 5th-year option last season. So what are they going to do with Sam Darnold? And if you're the 49ers, you're not taking on $18 million for Sam Darnold to back up Trey Lance. So it's kind of getting muddied now. Like, the landing spots aren't as clear as they once were. And I think that's a big problem. Mark says, once Brady came back, I just had a feeling Jimmy would be staying. I couldn't believe it. I never thought Jimmy would go to Tampa, but I definitely thought that Brady coming back eliminated obviously one of the potential spots Jimmy might be coming back to. That a quarterback would be coming back to, that then, a spot that another quarterback landed, maybe Jimmy goes there. So it did complicate things a bit more. I think for those of you who haven't heard my take on this, I don't necessarily fault the 49ers for not getting a trade done to this point, because I think if I'm them, the thing that I misinterpreted wasn't Jimmy Garoppolo's value individually. The thing that I believe was misinterpreted was the amount of landing spots, and just figuring, hey, one of these teams is going to need a starting quarterback. Like, there's only going to be so many guys who are available that look like a better option than Jimmy Garoppolo. But Tom Brady came back. Watson had his stuff cleared to an extent that Cleveland felt comfortable trading for him. Matt Ryan got moved. I don't think anybody saw Matt Ryan getting moved. Wentz goes to Washington. Russell Wilson goes to Denver. Like, there was a lot of unprecedented movement, in my opinion. And I think that that's where the misjudgment came. I don't think it was a scenario where teams were like, hey, we'll give you a 3rd round pick. And the 49ers just sat there with their arms folded like this. And we're like, no, we're only taking a second. Kick rocks if you're not going to give us a second. I don't think that's at all what happened. I think that it just was a matter of them not foreseeing a pretty wild QB carousel. Like, I can't remember an NFL offseason like this with so many big names still relatively in their prime, or near their prime, being moved. So I can understand getting to the point we're at now. But again, for me, this is where my harshest judgment and criticism comes. What are you going to do now? Because if that happens, but your pivot is to just sit here for 5 months and hang on to the guy, and then you end up releasing him in August, hey man, it's not my money. It's easy for me to say, eat the $7.5 million when I'm not the one writing checks. But to me, that's worth it. Like, how much price do you put on the headache that comes from this rampant QB speculation and having to answer these questions in front of the media and having to deal with these headlines every single day? You made an investment in Trey Lance. He is 21 years old. He's going to be 22 years old this year. You don't need to, I don't think you need to coddle the guy, but at the same time too, like, just severing ties with Jimmy, sending him on his way, it sends a very clear message to the team, to the fans, to the league, and to Trey Lance. You're the guy. Like, this is actions backing it up. We can sit here in your ear and tell you all, we foresee you being the starting quarterback this year. It guarantees nothing. If you make that move off Jimmy now, it sends a very clear message to everybody involved. And to me, that message is worth far more than the $7.5 million in injury guarantees you're eating up. Hey man, you can spin that as good PR. You can spin that to player. Hey, we take care of our players. We appreciate what Jimmy Garoppolo did for us. Let's call it good. I just think that that's the way they should go, but it's not the way that they'll likely end up going. And I think that's what makes it so hard. I agree with this take too. Hey, we all lose. We all miss sometimes. Sometimes that parlay ticket doesn't hit, right? And sometimes it's better to, take it on the chin and go home and come back stronger another day rather than continuing to double down. And that's what it feels like. It feels like they really took a loss on this. And instead of going home, they're going back to get more chips and trying to win back what they lost. Like, it just feels like a scenario where like pride is getting involved. And I do think that's the most concerning part of all this, is there's a level of, sure, I was there with them. I believe there could be some value for Jimmy Garoppolo, but at the same time, like, that trade could have, if that happened 2 weeks ago, that's fine. You hung on to him. You got something. There's a huge difference in waiting and believing in your, sticking to your belief that he has value in the beginning of March compared to doing that halfway through August and trading him when training camp comes around. And to me, I just don't see there being enough interest from another team, barring an injury to a starter elsewhere, where they're going to give up enough capital where the 49ers can really spin this. Is, see, we waited and we got something like, hey, if you do all this just to end up with a 6th round pick or a 5th round pick, like, I don't think it was worth it personally. But again, it's hard to quantify because you can quantify draft capital coming back. And I get that there's people that are going to say, well, you get something for him. He's worth something. But like, to me, the investment you made in Trey Lance is more important than anything else on the team right now. And I just think that this is so counterproductive to what I would do personally to put my franchise quarterback that I invested all of this capital into. Like, everything that I would want to do should have some sort of correlation to putting that player in a position to succeed. Even if it's signing players on defense, bringing in skill position guys, anything you do, you should do with a direct tie to making Trey Lance's life easier. And by keeping Jimmy Garoppolo around and talking about competition and talking about this and talking about how he's a good player and you're keeping it sends the complete wrong message. And you pretty much already burned your bridge with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, do you think Jimmy Garoppolo cares that you're sitting here saying that he's a good player? Like, come on, man. You traded 3 first-round picks, or you traded 2, you pick swapped, whatever you want to call it. You made it very clear that he's not the guy and you wanted to replace him, right? Jimmy came out and he said goodbye to the media, to the fans. Like, everybody knows what's going on. So sitting here and like it's not like you're sitting here salvaging your relationship with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, just because he's not in the media doing what we've seen guys like Baker Mayfield do, or even like what Kyler Murray's done, doesn't mean that Jimmy doesn't feel some type of way about this. Like, who could blame him? If I knew I was being replaced, I'd probably want to move on too. So it's just getting to the point now, man, where it's like it just boils down to like cut your losses and move on. And it feels like that's not what's going to happen. And we're going to sit here and we're going to have lives like this and discussions like this for the next 4 months. And hey, man, if people want to have those discussions, I'm here to give the people what they want. That's my intention. Talk about things people want to hear about. But I would be lying if I said that I was thrilled to discuss Jimmy Garoppolo and quarterback carousels and quarterback competitions for the next 4 months. Yeah, I think so. I think this is fair. This is where we're at. They're at a point where they're not going to release him until that money is not an issue, or he can pass a physical, or they can trade him, which I get. I understand it, but I just think the fact that it's gone on this long is what's concerning. Like, I'm not sitting here like, oh my God, this is the end of this is the last bit of slack I'm going to give the organization. They completely blew it. Like, I get it, man. I understand why they're doing it, and that's why like I'm sitting here like I understand why John Lynch said what he said today. Like, he can't really say or do anything else at this point. But to me, it's just like, is it worth it? Like, it's that like that old saying, like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, is it really worth it at this point to drag this out even further? Again, I will say 1,000,000 times over, no, I don't think it is. So again, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, what you think, about the front office doing this, what Jimmy, what's going on with him, anything you guys have to say. I appreciate it. I've touched on most of what I wanted to say about this. There's a few other thoughts I have, but again, I want to involve you guys as much as possible too. Yeah, and that's fair, Emiliano. I think so too. I think, hey, Mitch Trubisky's a bridge guy where you can get to next year's QB class looks a lot better than this one. Pittsburgh can kind of keep their head above water, tread water a bit for a year, maybe be a playoff team, maybe win 8-9 games, something like that. And then next year they can take a quarterback. Maybe they move up for a guy like Malik Willis this year, who I've heard they like a lot. When you move to Jimmy, like if you're going to give up capital for Jimmy, you probably should plan on having him around for a couple of years. And if you're just looking for a bridge guy to have momentarily, to be Trubisky makes more sense just because you're not tied down to him financially and you're not tied down by losing draft picks. Justin makes a good point. If you guys haven't seen Rita Oak's drawings, she's doing a drawing of Jimmy Garoppolo every single day until he gets traded. So I think maybe she was thinking, 30, 25 drawings. She's going to end up with a couple hundred drawings, and I'm impressed at the level of creativity. So if you go to Twitter, I think there's an Instagram page too. But if you go to Twitter at Rita Oak, Justin has the @ here. I promise you'll probably get a good chuckle out of it, no matter where you stand on this whole issue. Some of those drawings are fantastic, and the level of creativity is something that I have to give a shout out to and give show my own appreciation for, because it's made a tense and uncomfortable situation a little bit less uncomfortable, and it brought some much needed lightheartedness to all of this. I don't know if they did or not, Dawson. I have to go back and watch the press conference. To be honest, I've been running around like crazy today, so I haven't had a chance to see it all the way through. But I think that that's not something they would answer directly. They would say something about QB competition. We have guys on the roster we really like, and we can't wait to see them go battle it out, and iron sharpens iron. You get some sort of cliche and some sort of, I highly doubt there would be a direct answer about Lance being the week 1 guy. They seem to be telling him behind the scenes. Those are the reports we keep hearing, that they keep telling him behind the scenes that he is in fact the guy, that he will be the starter. He's the one they're handing the reins over to. But again, until we see that, I don't blame fans for not feeling comfortable. And especially as long as Jimmy Garoppolo is on this roster, it's kind of hard. It's almost hard to believe that Trey Lance will be the week 1 starter. So I get what you're saying, Dawson, but even if that does get asked, there's so many ways to sidestep that question. And I'd be shocked if John Lynch answered in a yes or no manner to that. There'd be some sort of sidestep where he, again, covers the bases and talks up the whole QB room, and probably finds a way to say something really nice about Nate Sudfeld. Dude, hey, we can't count out Nate Sudfeld. We love, what he brings to the table. Like, they're really good at bouncing around these questions. So that's why I don't think it would be possible, unfortunately. Mark thinks Kyle holds grudges, and he thinks that maybe they will release him after the draft, after other teams have their QB situations. I don't see this happening, and this is why, Mark. I think that it's just bad business. At the end of the day, human beings play the sport of football, and you need to create an environment that's conducive that human beings want to be a part of. And I think that that's one thing that Kyle and John Lynch have actually done really well. If you hear players talk, people within the organization talk, anybody that's been a part of this organization for the last few, not anybody, but most people who've been a part of it for the last few years, have nothing but good things to say about that environment and that culture they've cultivated. And I just think doing things like that, especially with that kind of like ulterior motive there, that kind of erases all the hard work you do. And I just don't think that, again, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that. I don't think they're going to do that person. It's an interesting thought. I get what you're saying, but I just don't think that that's going to happen. Let's see. We draft a guard. I think Banks is going to end up starting. It seems pretty confident that Mac will be back. I know I saw George Kittle comment on something earlier. He's with, I don't know if he still is. He was with Alex Mack in Ireland over the weekend and last week. And he said something about one more year. So I'd be shocked if Kittle's posting about Alex Mack coming back for another year, considering they were together overseas. And I don't think he would just say that to say that. I'm sure there's something there. And the understanding was that Mac would probably be back. So Mac will be back, but for all things are pointing to that. Sorry, I can't say that 100% guarantee. It looks like he's coming back. They still should draft a center that's like the heir apparent, in my opinion. It's such an important position in this offense, and it's so important to get a good one. And I just think they're better off addressing that in the middle rounds this year. Give that player a year or so, develop, get comfortable blocking, having the ability to learn from a guy like Alex Mack, heady player, really smart, former Pro Bowler, just all around great teammate from everything we hear. I think that it'd be good to address it now. I do think the 49ers will draft an O-lineman or two. They have 9 picks in this draft, so they're going to add positions all over the place. It's not like they're coming into this where they have 3 picks and 3 areas of needs, and it's clear cut. They could take receivers. They could take edge guys. They could take corners or, safeties. They're going to be all over the place because they have so many picks, and they have the ability to kind of throw a bunch of darts at the dartboard and see what sticks. I would expect them to take a couple offensive linemen. Let's see. Trying to find stuff that's relevant. Sorry, I'm going through the comments here real quick. Justin says when he gets, because he's gonna run out of the house like Antonio Brown when he got cut by the Raiders. Oh man, that's so funny. Andrew has a good point. Yeah, I'm of the same mindset. Like, hey man, if you if you would have stayed at 12, you still could have gotten an impact player last season. If you really thought Jimmy was the guy and you were this reluctant, this is another reason why I don't think that like Jimmy is going to be like the starter this year. I don't think that there's this like second guessing. Like I think there's a tough hill they're overcoming here where they have to sever ties with Jimmy, and they're having a hard time kind of initiating that breakup. I'm sure plenty of people can relate with their own personal relationships, man. I'm sure there's been plenty of times where anybody watching has been in a relationship where it was great. There was good times. They really liked the person, but it was pretty clear it was time to move on. Sometimes it's hard to do that, man. I get it. Sometimes it's not easy to say goodbye, but I don't think it's out of like, oh no, we messed up this Trey Lance pick and we need to keep Jimmy around, because again, like they moved those picks for a reason. And I think that at this point, it's almost better to just like throw Lance out there and whatever happens, happens, rather than continue to keep him behind the scenes. And this like isn't a situation like Green Bay where like, we haven't heard great things about Jordan Love, but Aaron Rodgers is still their quarterback. Like, so it's not like people are sitting here like pounding the table to see Jordan Love. You can't really compare the situations, because that's what I see a lot of people compare it to is like, oh, well, Packers missed on Jordan Love. Why didn't how come the 49ers can't miss on Trey Lance? I don't think it's remotely close to the same thing. So at this point, like it's almost better to just throw Trey Lance out there and see what happens, rather than, even if you did have reservations, continue to keep Jimmy around, because it makes it look worse and worse that you gave up all these picks for a guy that you won't get on the field. And I just don't see the 49ers allowing that to happen. It would be terrible from an optics standpoint. And aside from this whole QB mess, like they've been pretty good for the most part when it comes to handling optics and stuff like that. So they're aware of it, I think, and I think that it'll sort itself out. I do agree, half in, half out doesn't work. That's why I think they just have to, once the Jimmy dust settles and he moves on and Justin runs out of his house like Antonio Brown, I think that this will end up clearing itself out a little bit more. I think that we'll have some clarity and we'll have some, sense of relief that, hey, it's over. We don't have to worry about it. We can go back to arguing about, the defense or offensive line or whatever the heck people want to argue about, punters. I don't know, whatever the flavor of the week is that people want to argue about. But it'd be nice to not have this like Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo debate anymore. I think we've debated that ad nauseum enough for a lifetime, truthfully, in a little over 12 months. So I'm kind of over it myself. Yeah, I think that's a fair point too. I definitely think that there will be people that that want him cut now. That like again, for me, if they don't get anything for him, I won't be surprised. To me, it's just, again, it's about sending a message more than it is getting capital in return. So I'm indifferent, really, but I do agree that there will be a lot of people that want him just gone now that will be the first to complain that they don't get anything for him if they cut him a few months from now. But I will say this, cutting him a few months from now definitely made life harder than it had to be financially when it comes to cap space, restructuring contracts, free agents and stuff. So there is a valid argument to be made by those people that are like, hey, cutting him in August isn't the same as cutting him in March or cutting him, as the new league year starts. Like that is a fair argument for anyone who would make that, in my eyes. I will say this. I was at the majority of training camp practices, right? I think Trey Lance, it was clear as day how much more physically gifted he was. Just watching them, 5 minutes, dude, is all it took to watch and see that Trey Lance was clearly had the better arm, was faster, stronger, more mobile, all those things. But there was an adjustment period when it came to, 4-minute offense, 2-minute drill, situational stuff that, it's part of growing. It's part of adjusting to the NFL level. It's part of coming in, commanding a new offense and learning an install. So I don't think necessarily that this was like an unfair, like quarterback competition. I think that I was not surprised at all when Jimmy was the week 1 starter. It made sense from what I saw. I would have had no issue with Trey Lance starting either. I thought that he looked pretty good too. It wasn't that he was terrible and Jimmy was great. It was just that Jimmy did a few things better that I just think a veteran who's been in the league for 8 years would have that leg up on a rookie. So for whatever it's worth, I appreciate you guys watching. I would assume that you value my opinion to an extent. For whatever it is, from my unbiased opinion, I thought that there was enough that I saw from Jimmy where it made sense why Kyle was comfortable starting in week 1, even though I thought Trey was the more physically gifted player. But it also wasn't that like Trey was terrible and Jimmy was fantastic. If anybody's pushing that narrative, I would disagree with that entirely. I just think that, again, that situational football, that move the ball stuff, that when the clock really was important and they get into these very specific down distances and stuff, Jimmy did look a little bit more comfortable. But again, he should. It would have been extremely concerning if Trey Lance just came in right away and looked that much better than Jimmy, because that would be more of an indictment on Jimmy than it would be saying anything about Trey Lance, So I expect it would be fair if they do. And Jamal nailed it. Jamal's usually on point. My guy's always spitting facts. Yeah, it's just you have to posture to some extent like you still hold some kind of power in these negotiations or these trade talks or whatever you want to call it. Like, you have to make it. You can't be like, oh, well, yeah, the guy's injured and we don't think he's like this great quarterback, which is why we drafted Trey Lance. Like, you can't just come out and say things like that, even if that's what people read between the lines and see, even if that's what your actions may be interpreted as. You can't come out and physically say that. So, like, that's, again, why I wasn't so up in arms about John Lynch saying that. And I get people are just like fatigued with the whole Jimmy thing, but he had nothing else to say, man. Like, what, he can't just be like, no, we're going to cut him as soon as he's, we're able to cut bait and not eat the $7.5 million. You can't say stuff like that. So Jamal's right. Ellis, thank you for coming by. I appreciate it. I am trying to get this out the mud, man. I'm telling you guys, every day if I can. I'm sure there's going to be some day soon where I just can't make it work, but every day until I can't, I'm going to try to do a stream talking about something. So subscribe, like, turn notifications on. 90% of the time when I do these, I'm going to try to incorporate the chat. So if you guys have questions you want to talk about, topics you want to talk about, we'll get to that. We'll address whatever you want to talk about. But thank you, Ellis. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody coming by while I am trying to get this up and going. I've been doing this for less than a week, and I think we were at like 330, 340 or something like that earlier. I've just no words for the amount of support I've gotten so far. So thank you guys so much. Yeah, he didn't play good in the playoffs. I don't think that's something that can be argued. I don't think he was very good. He was hurt, but at the same time, like, he didn't play great in the playoffs in 2019 either, and he was hurt then. So I just think that's kind of who he is at this point. Yeah, I agree, John. I think that he definitely did, and I think that it's at the point now where he definitely is overplayed it a little bit. So I just realized I am so far behind. I'm like 30 minutes behind a comment. So I'm going to try to get to a little bit closer and see if I can get, I want to make sure I don't miss anything if people had specific things to talk about. Again, I appreciate your guys' patience as I get used to this. I'm still taking lessons from these YouTube stars like Jason Aponte and Brad Graham. So I'm still trying to find my, my groove doing this. So let me see if I can get down and get a little bit closer. Let's see. Ellis had a question. I think it's the injury stuff, to be honest, because I think there's enough volatility amongst other quarterbacks who just happen to stay healthy that, like, the injury concerns are really what tips the scales. Like, they're both not, like, the combination isn't great. Like, you can kind of get by. Like, if you have a really good quarterback who's hurt a lot, you can kind of justify it. If you have a quarterback that's healthy all the time, but they may be a little volatile, you can justify it. The marriage of the two is what really creates a problem. And I think that's the biggest issue, to be honest. So yeah, I would say that it's the injury stuff, but having both be a concern is definitely like something we need to discuss too. And I think makes it more difficult. James asked thoughts on Titans being a fit for Jimmy G. I mean, they have Tannehill, and Tannehill is better than Jimmy in my opinion. And I just think that he makes, Vish said it perfectly. If you guys don't know Vish is a genius. I think Vish said, I apologize if I'm misquoting this, Vish. Vish said Ryan Tannehill makes big boy throws, and he does. If you go and watch some of these throws that they ask Ryan Tannehill to make down the field, outside the numbers, into tight windows, standing in the pocket, getting hit, like, Ryan Tannehill makes some big time throws. He just unfortunately has had a couple of really bad playoff performances the last couple times he's been there. So I think that's the lasting image people have of Ryan Tannehill, but he's still a really good quarterback and he's better than Jimmy. I have no, issue saying that pretty confidently. Yeah, and that's a fair point, John. Like, there are guys I think he is an objective upgrade over, but maybe teams don't feel like Jimmy is worth giving up draft capital for, not worth giving up a second, or not worth giving up a third round pick. And the biggest thing for me is, like, to me, the 49ers gave up a second round pick to get Jimmy Garoppolo, right? And that was 5 years ago. They gave up that second round pick. They got to 2 NFC championship games. They got to a Super Bowl. They sold a ton of merchandise. They sold the fan base on a resurgence. Like, they got way more than a second round pick's worth of value from Jimmy Garoppolo. So I would hope they're not in this, like, holding pattern where it's like, oh, we traded a second, we have to get back what we got, or at least close to it. You already got it. You could let him walk out the door today and you already won that trade in my eyes. Like, it's not even really close. So I hope that wouldn't be the scenario, personally. Let's see. Again, I'm trying to get close to it. I'm realizing I'm, like, super far behind with the comments. I think my StreamYard was lagging a little bit. Let me see if I can get a little bit closer, and I appreciate everybody being patient with this. Again, I didn't realize I was so far behind time wise with the comments. Let's see. We have let's see. Mr. Carter thinks it's going to be Pittsburgh or Carolina. He's still pretty steadfast on his belief with that. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. You could definitely take a good victory lap on that if that happens. Emiliano says that he looked uncomfortable at that presser. So if he's a politician, turn up for him on election day, maybe vulnerable. Hey, I'll ask you to revert back to 2017. I think a lot of people bought in when he first came in 2017, 2018, when things were going good in 2019. When you've been in office for 6 years now, sometimes those approval ratings dip a little bit. So I still think he's pretty good at what he does when it comes to covering all his bases on stuff like that. Unfortunately, so thank you guys for coming by. I can't see Twitter comments. Twitter and, like, Periscope and everything, like, I didn't even realize this. I would pop into my friends' streams and comment from Twitter. You can't see the comments on here if it's from Twitter. So if you do have something to say, please pop onto YouTube because I unfortunately can't see it otherwise. I'm really sorry. Other than that, I would, if it wasn't for that, I would answer all of them and try to get to them. I just can't see them. So I apologize for missing any comments. But yeah, if you go through Twitter, like if you click, and if you're watching on Twitter too, please click the link to like the YouTube. I keep forgetting to drop it in the comments under it, but through Twitter, I can't see your comments. So if you do want to watch and be involved, click on the YouTube link so you can comment through there. I would greatly appreciate that so I can keep everybody involved. BSE's been making a lot of good points. 2 second-round picks for a QB that can't throw until July is extremely skeptical. That's why it never made sense. How much better is Jimmy G than Sam Darnold in the current iteration of the Panthers? I think he's a lot better. Sam Darnold was terrible last year, dude. I think Jimmy at least can play point guard and get the ball in the short to intermediate in space to guys like DJ Moore and McCaffrey. I like Paris Marshall a lot. Like I think Jimmy is an upgrade over Darnold. I don't think Darnold is that good. And it seems like there's some people in the chat who agree. Again, I'm not a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy either, but dude, Sam Darnold was just awful. So it's kind of it's the bar isn't very high on that one. This is a good question though. Is he enough of an upgrade to make a difference for that team? That's where it gets interesting because maybe Carolina's like, hey, we already gave up picks. They gave up picks and they guaranteed Darnold's salary. And it's, to be honest with you, looking like a gamble to me that's going to cost a coach and a GM their job because I just don't see how they turn that around. He just is not very good. And they're stuck with him pretty much. Like at least the 49ers have the option of cutting Jimmy at this point. Like the Panthers can't just cut Sam Darnold, and who are they going to get if they do? So they're in a much worse position. And again, John, this is my thing. The reason why you would do that in my eyes is because you do that to save your job if you're Matt Rule, because maybe Jimmy Garoppolo catches fire and he's good enough that you can win 9 or 10 games this year and you're able to hang around a little bit. And maybe that's just kind of my rationalization looking at it from the outside in, but you've seen Sam Darnold isn't going to get it done most likely. And sure, maybe as an organization, it's better to eat the losses this year, end up with a better draft pick next year. But if you're Matt Rule, like you're probably not getting brought back. You're not staying there. So like, it's interesting to see, like, I would be interested to know the dynamic of how they sort that out as an organization for sure. Yeah, I think James Foster, here, James nails it too. Yeah. His job's on the hot seat. Let's see. I think the Colts lost interest. No, to be honest with you, John, the Colts, and this is everything, and this came out too. So when I was in Indianapolis at the Combine, I spent a lot of time with Nate Atkins, who covers the team on the beat for the Indy Star, and he made it very clear that the Colts' issue with Carson Wentz was way more about what was happening off the field and in the locker room than what was happening on the field, and that's why they were so much interested in Jimmy, and that's why I always believed it was an actual potential landing spot for Jimmy, because he was a guy that, you know, for all of his faults that Jimmy has, he's a guy that does have those intangibles and does have teammates say stuff like, so for example, real quick, and again, I'm going to try to catch up to the comments that are more recent, so I appreciate everybody hanging around. I will get to all of them. Nate was writing a piece about maybe Jimmy getting traded there, and he asked me to send him a couple quotes from teammates on Jimmy. So I sent him a couple that I had saved that were from Trent Williams, George Kittle, you know, superstar, top of their position in the league kind of players. And he immediately was like, I don't think I've seen a quote even a third as long as this from a Colts teammate about Carson Wentz. So there's a level of respect and admiration that these guys have for Jimmy G that goes beyond the typical just, hey, I got to say something nice in the media about my quarterback. I don't want to be known as the guy trashing my quarterback. I'm saying this to look like they genuinely have admiration for him. So I think the Colts' biggest thing was that they just didn't feel comfortable with the shoulder. They wanted somebody that could throw during OTAs, and Jimmy wasn't going to be able to do it. And then Matt Ryan came available. I think Matt Ryan's a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo too, so I don't blame them at all for moving on to Matt Ryan. And even if it's only, 2 or 3 years, whatever he has left in the tank, some kind of continuity is what the Colts need at quarterback. And I think Matt Ryan offers a path to that continuity much more so than Jimmy Garoppolo would have. So it makes sense the way it panned out. Bryant's got a great statement here as well. All their actions and all their words leading up to this was that, hey, it was goodbye. Jimmy said something along the lines of, and I apologize if I'm butchering the quote, but he said something along the lines of, yeah, I know they're the team, John, they're going to help me, facilitate a trade and get to where I want to go. Like, it seems like the plan was always to kind of trade him. So it's really awkward to like go through that, acknowledge that there wasn't much of a market, and then be like, oh, you know what? Come back, start for another year, come compete for your job for another, like, sure, it's not impossible that that's what happens, but it just seems so far out of the realm of possibility, right? Like, it just doesn't seem like something that they would end up happening. And it's going to be a battle of like what part of your pride you're willing to, give in a little to, because it's almost like they're stuck between like, they don't want to admit they're taking the loss on the Jimmy Garoppolo trade, but you also, if you bring him back, you're admitting you took the loss kind of moving up for Trey Lance, and took the loss by, making it clear you were going to part ways. So it's like, what area of the pride is going to give in is something to watch for sure. So I think that's super interesting. I agree, Brian. I don't think the Niners want Jimmy to go to Seattle, because I can tell you this right now. If Jimmy Garoppolo ended up on the Seahawks, don't ask me why. Don't ask me how. There's no logic behind it. I have no numbers, no statistics. The 49ers would end up losing both games to the Seahawks this year. And I'm not going to lie, that would be one of the most like compelling stories in sports, is the 49ers getting owned for a decade by Seattle. Russell Wilson finally leaves. The fans want Jimmy Garoppolo, not all, but a lot of fans want Jimmy Garoppolo gone. He goes to Seattle, and Seattle still beats the Niners twice a year. And it would end up playing out in a scenario where like the Seahawks finish like 5-12 or like 4-13 in two of their wins against the 49ers. Like, it can't happen that way, man. And it would. That's why, like, you can't let Jimmy get to Seattle, because that's exactly what would happen. Oh my God. Hey, I'll tell you what, a Jimmy G and Drew Lock training camp battle, you know who's the winner of that? The defensive backs. You're going to have a defensive back room that's fired up and playing with an all-time confidence if you have Drew Lock and Jimmy G throwing 17 picks every practice. I think that would be maybe you're making an investment in the secondary by making that move. That would be a fun one to watch. Yeah, I think that's fair too. So this is something that doesn't get talked about enough as well. Trey Lance hurt his finger against the Oakland Raiders. He was throwing a ball, and the follow through, I believe it was his index finger. I apologize if it was another one. It was a long time ago. He chipped a bone in his throwing finger pretty much. And that injury was much worse than I believe was let on, because as that injury healed later through training camp, the more and more we started to hear about how Lance was looking better and he was lighting it up and doing all these different things. So I think that's a really good point as well. Let's see. Yeah, and that's the other thing, bro. That's the point I've tried to make too, man. I think that if they really want to, find, if they really cared about where Jimmy wanted to go and they wanted to sell that, there's a really easy path to doing it. You cut him right now, and you spend it as, hey, here's $7.5 million. Thanks for everything you did. We appreciate you. Go heal up that shoulder, and best of luck to you. It's not going to happen, but they could do it. I think that that's a very viable option. So I think that's a great point. Let's see. Rich in the chat. I know I'm a little bit late. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate you coming by. Rich Madrid, the master of the X's and O's. If you guys don't know, he is fantastic. Let's see. I think that the whole sitting QBs things changed. Like, I think there's definitely a plausible like benefit to doing it, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with letting a guy adjust, get acclimated, get better. When that changed, though, or the effectiveness of it changed, is when the rookie wage scale kicked in and these quarterback contracts on rookie deals started being the recipe for success. Back before that CBA was, I think it was 2010. I apologize if I'm off on that. I think 2010 or 2012, within the last decade. When that was changed, that's when things became imperative when it comes to not sitting a rookie for too long, because you're basically eating the best years of that contract. And I just think that it's much better to take the lumps and take the speed bumps and growing pains, whatever you want to call it, with the rookie on that deal, rather than have them sit. Back in the day, you could have guys like Montana and Young and Favre and Rodgers and those guys sit and learn for a couple years, and it wasn't burning a hole in your team building strategy. It's just, unfortunately, the way the CBA is constructed, you have to maximize. And that's another reason why, if you're eating the first 2 years of Trey Lance's rookie deal, man, it looks really bad. Sure, you can justify one, but two, that's when it's like, hey, man, it's been easy this year to justify the 49ers getting the NFC Championship game. And hey, it was a successful season. But next year, if Trey Lance is on the bench, it's almost like no matter where you feel, it's going to be hard to sell the masses on anything short of a Super Bowl being a success if Jimmy were to start or whoever was to come in and start and Lance was on the bench. So you kind of put yourself up against a wall by doing that. This is a good question. Do you think Kyle and John are in between winning now and the future? Yeah, I do. But that's the thing where it's like, like it's a different sport, but like the Warriors are kind of in the same thing right now too, where they have these really good rookies, but they also have, a Hall of Fame core, and they're kind of stuck between trying to develop guys while also winning now. And it's really hard to do that. Like, hey, if you can pull it off, you look like a genius. Your front office looks great. Everything's awesome. But yeah, I do think the 49ers are stuck in that mold. And I think that that's a position they put themselves into. So to me, you invest in the guy who's young, who you moved mountains to obtain, and you just let it ride from there. And I don't think that Trey Lance is such a developmental prospect that you're going to have to sacrifice being a winning football team. I think they can still win 10 games and go into the playoffs, maybe win a game too if Trey Lance starts this year. And if you're getting progress with Trey Lance moving forward, looking more comfortable, looking like a guy that can compete at the highest level, looking like a guy who can, improve, I just think that that's more valuable than where they're at currently. Yeah, if they play this out for a comp pick, they will. So I don't know if it'll be 27 million, Ben. I think they would have to come to some sort of restructure. Maybe they give Jimmy like 10, 12, something like that, and he's content being a backup, still making money, and they get their comp pick. I'd be shocked, man, if it was 27 million. But you're right. They'd end up essentially buying a third-round comp pick at that point, and I think that that's not the best way to go about business. Again, you have to weigh, it's not just asset management. You also have to understand like the human being management. And I just think the stress that it would cause, like John Lynch was like, oh, I didn't think it was that awkward for those guys last year. And I kind of was sitting there like, dude, it was awkward for everybody involved. It was clear as day how awkward it was for everybody involved. So I just think that that's something to definitely keep an eye on too, but that's a good point. Ben also says the Chiefs fully invested in Mahomes. Yeah, if they wait till next year, but again, the whole Trey Lance thing, I think we need to wait a few years before we can really fully judge how they went about this, rookie contract in these first few years. But as of now, I can see why people are a little concerned with how it might be. Let me see. And trying to get to as many as possible. Thank you guys for being patient. I'm realizing I'm still like 20 minutes behind with where I'm at in the comments. So I'm trying to catch up. Again, if you guys are new and just coming by, please like, subscribe, spread the word. This is the first few days of this channel, so we're just getting it up and running. Turn notifications on. I'm going to be doing streams every day talking about the 49ers and a bunch of other stuff too. Let's see. That's interesting, Chardall. Yeah, hey, maybe the Seahawks would, because again, I don't think Drew Lock's very good. I was joking about the Drew Lock, Jimmy Garoppolo training camp and how it would go, but I think he's an upgrade over what we've seen from Drew Lock. So I do think that would be kind of tough. That's a good point, Chardall. I do think that that's something to keep an eye on. James thinks Jimmy would be good in Seattle. CJ's talking about, hey, I know it'd be exhausting that locker room. I think so too. I think those guys, they had to toe a really tough line where they had to make it seem like they're not picking sides. They had to give their support to their starting quarterback while also not trashing the confidence of the young rookie. Like it just puts people in a tough spot, man. Like part of this business in my eyes is building a work environment that's conducive to success. And it just feels like when you create uncomfortable environments that are objectively avoidable, then you're not doing your job to the full potential you could be. If they have a QB competition, Ayuk is going to try his all-time best to get open in those practices. Oh, that'd be good. I think Jimmy would get cut first, honestly, because if I'm not, I could be wrong with the numbers, but I believe Baker has like guaranteed money on his 5th-year option. The Niners have no guaranteed money to Jimmy at this point. So I think it would be Jimmy just based on that. They were at Cam Jurgens Pro Day. Love to hear that at Nebraska. Cam Jurgens would be a great center. I think he's somebody that would be really fun to watch. I think that he's somebody that really blew me away at the combine and would be a great heir apparent to Alex Mack. Lance completion percentage next year, I'm going to say like low 60s. I still think there's some room to improve with the accuracy, working on his throwing motion a bit. But I also think that he's more than capable of executing this offense. And this offense is going to provide like a baseline of there's a high floor based on the open looks you're going to get in this scheme. So I think that will take care of a lot of the just raw numbers for terms of accuracy and completion percentage and stuff like that. Let's see. Thank you, Zach. I appreciate it. I actually am like awful, dude. My didn't do my hair or anything today. Been running around like crazy, but it is what it is. I'm here grinding. We're getting it out the mud together. We're all having fun. I hope I'm having fun. Appreciate you guys being here. Yeah, I think that's fair too. I think that so what we heard last year, right, was that like Trey Lance came in and picked up the install way faster than they expected. Like their understanding was like, hey man, he's raw. He's probably going to need a year. We have Jimmy, it's fine. And Trey came in, immediately learned the install, and immediately came in the first week of camp and was like blowing them away with some of the throws he was making. So it's almost like the quarterback competition they didn't expect when he was drafted manifested itself a little bit. And then they were kind of like, all right, well, the fingers hurt now. He's kind of still showing some growing pains as a rookie. Jimmy's going to take the job week 1, but I do think that that's a very good point that's made there, because he's made a lot of really good points in there. I want to give him a shout out as well. He's been making great points in the chat today. Yeah, Trey Lance in the Texans game. If you go back and you watch the Arizona game and you watch the Texans game, not only is it a good indicator of Trey Lance's development, but it's also a good indicator of like that finger injury probably played a pretty big part in why maybe he did have some accuracy issues early on, and why maybe he wasn't thrown out there in more packages and stuff like that. Because I think that it definitely affected them more so than was let on. Yes, thank you. I appreciate everybody hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. I really appreciate it. Do they realize how bad rookie contract is? I hope so, because they have a lot of guys they have to pay. That's the consequence of drafting really good players year after year. You're going to have to pay all of these guys at some point. So I certainly hope that they know that, but it remains to be seen if they truly do. Excuse me. This is a good point too. When all the marketing stuff comes out and you start seeing brochures and magazines and social media stuff and season ticket packets and all that stuff, if it doesn't feature a lot of Trey Lance, that's when it's going to be a big moment, as Emiliano was saying. I think that's a really good point. I'd be shocked if you start seeing Jimmy on some of that stuff. That's when it's really like, oh boy, this is maybe we're just speculating, but it's definitely something to look into. Let's see, trying to get down to a few more of these too. Dude, honestly, I don't know where Baker goes. I don't think Baker is like getting a starting job anywhere. I don't know anybody else who's out there who's going to give him. He's going to probably have to do what Mitch Trubisky did and go take a backup job for a year and hope something opens up somewhere where he can rebuild his value and rebuild his stock. Maybe Seattle likes Baker enough, but good God, man, I would feel so bad for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett if they have Drew Lock. If they have to go from Russell Wilson to Drew Lock and Baker Mayfield, that's got to be super rough. So I don't know. I'm assuming this is Steve Ludwig. So if it is, I apologize. Steve's a Seahawks fan. So I hope he doesn't go to Seattle, dude, because if he does, you're going to have a really rough year. You're going to have to deal with what 49ers fans have dealt with the last few years with that volatility and that roller coaster. Rookie CBA was 2011. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. Stafford and Bradford were the last QBs that got paid where they got a bunch of that guaranteed money and they had to negotiate contracts and there wasn't like a set scale. So it's a little different now in terms of that stuff. I think that what John Lynch said was true because they did. They had the ability to move money around and do things. It made things more difficult than it needed to be. And I don't think he denied that at all. But I do think that like they probably weren't going to be super aggressive anyway. Like he said something about how they came out and they were all gas, no breaks to start out, and they wanted to be more reserved in free agency this year. So I don't think that it would have been this massive difference, but they also would have had 20 some odd $1 million to play with that they didn't now. So it's definitely something to like you can't sit here and say that it didn't make it harder than it needs to be, right? But it also didn't prevent them outright from doing it. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. Seattle wouldn't trade for Jimmy G. You know what, Steve? You keep denying it. Your quarterback's going to be Jimmy G. You're going to have a depth chart of like Jimmy G and Drew Lock and like Dustin Crum or somebody from this year too. So get that number 10 jersey ready, pal. Yeah, he could be. It could be after he's cut, and it could be a situation where Seattle does what they do and they bring in a guy and they keep him for 3 days and they have him in the interview room picking his brain about what the 49ers are doing, and then they cut him a couple days later. Maybe they do that with Jimmy too. Hey man, I don't think John Lynch is doing all that. I don't think he's all on this. If I'm doing this, you guys are stuck doing it too. I would hope not. That would not be the wisest path of action for him. Yeah, that's true. They can use the freed up cap space to front load Devo and Bosa's contracts. I do think that that's something that ultimately end up happening, and I think those contracts do end up likely getting finalized around when Jimmy's going to get cut, probably closer to camp. That's when Warner and Kittle both got their extensions. So I do think it's going to be somewhere in that time frame. So that is a good point. On a side note, I think I'm all caught up. If I missed any questions, I apologize. I was trying to get back to like closer to current rather than be 30 minutes behind. So if you do have any other questions, thoughts, topics you guys want to share, please go ahead. I'm pretty much I got what I wanted to say out there. I threw my thoughts around. So if you guys have anything else you want to add, please drop it in the chat. If not, I'm probably going to cut this off here pretty soon, just because, again, I think we don't want to spend hours and hours going in circles talking about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? I just think that, again, to summarize, for those of you who may have joined late, the 49ers put themselves in this position. It's unfortunately where we're at, but I think that realistically, what else is John Lynch supposed to say? Like, the words don't matter to me at this point. The actions going forward are what really matters. I would say focus as much energy as you can on the positive things about the team. The defensive line looks good. They have great skill position guys. Maybe we'll start to see some video of Trey Lance throwing in OTAs. And that's another thing, back to the marketing. Maybe we see Trey Lance throwing dimes in practice, and they're really pushing that narrative, because unfortunately, I don't think we'll get a resolution on this Jimmy thing for quite some time. And I don't think it's a situation, dude, for 2 weeks, every day, I was refreshing my phone every 5 minutes. Like, I had stories prepped for him being traded to 5 different teams. Like, I was just like, please get this over with. It's not happening. So again, we have a few more questions here. If you guys have any more, please share them now. I'm happy to hang around for a bit, but once we kind of run out of questions and stuff, I'll probably cut this off. Is Aiden Hutchinson a lock for number 1? Maybe. I'm not that impressed with Aiden Hutchinson, to be honest. Like, I think he'll be a fine NFL player. I think he's definitely a guy, like, he'll be a starter in the league for a good amount of time, but I don't ever see him being this like transcendent, like all pro level talent. I just personally am not that enamored with him. But I think he's, again, like, hey, if you value that as a franchise where you're willing to, take that really high floor as somebody that's probably going to be a starter for you, more power to you. I wouldn't take him at number 1. I'd take Thibodeau over him. If I really wanted to get an edge guy, I'd take Thibodeau. This isn't a great class, in my opinion, to have the number 1 overall pick. I would not be that thrilled if I had the number 1 overall pick in this class. I would probably, if I was Jacksonville, I'd be looking to trade down personally. So this is a good question. I would ask, and this isn't going to be a question that excites people, but I would ask Kyle if this year they put more emphasis on really addressing special teams aggressively, and if they felt that that was an area where they came up short from a team building and roster constructing standpoint in past years, and if they did some kind of self-reflection and really made that a priority this year, because I think their actions back that up, but I'd want to hear his honest input on if that was something that they neglected or overlooked in recent years. And again, I understand people don't like talking about special teams, but it does feel like that's something where for a couple years they would get guys on the roster like Richie James and Kraft and some of these guys that like were okay on special teams, but it felt like they were just trying to jam more like receivers that would, contribute as receivers and contribute on the offense. And they were just kind of like double dipping as special teamers rather than getting guys that were impact special teams players. And this year they went out and they got Odom, they got Burks. It felt like they went out and they were really like, hey, we were awful on special teams last year. We need to be better. And I think that little moves like that, even though they're not exciting now, they make a huge difference. So I'd be really interested to hear if Kyle candidly was just kind of like, hey, we've messed that up in the past. we felt like we needed to be better? That would be my question for him. I know it's not exciting and probably not what people would want to hear, but that's probably what I would ask him, because I think that's the most compelling thing. Oh wow, the Bills got a new stadium. That's interesting. I did not see that yet. That's but do you build? This is the thing I talk about with people who cover the Packers all the time. Like, do you build the stadium for the team you have now or for the teams you want to build in the future? Because having that cold weather can be an advantage. Josh Allen's not going to be around forever, but I do agree right now they are a team that would probably fare better inside a dome. So that's a very interesting debate that we could always have at another time for sure. I don't know which one you mean. If you're talking about all the coaches, I thought that Mike McDaniel looked like he was fitting in very well in Miami. He had the lightweight like dress shirt with like the tank top underneath. He looked like he's living his best life. That was the first thing I noticed. I'm a big Mike McDaniel fan, so I hope he's having a good time in Miami. I thought it was good. I thought it was kind of funny. They had all those guys get together and take a picture. I'm not the biggest Nick Benito guy. Brisker, if he's still there at 61, I'm sprinting to the podium with the card. Jaquan Brisker is a really good player. I would be ecstatic if they were able to get him. Yeah, I think that's fair too. I still think they are going to take an edge guy. I'm with you on that. I think that's what they'll ultimately end up doing as well. Hey man, there's a lot of people who'd be happy with that. I like Max Mitchell. I like Watson. Haven't gotten to watch Petrie too much. But yeah, hey, I'd take 2 out of the 4 of those. I like Josh Pascal a lot out of Kentucky. He's a guy I've been watching a little bit more recently. He's a guy who I haven't seen get a ton of exposure or talk amongst 49ers fans. He's somebody I'd really like to see. If they go line there, I'd be fine. If they go safety, to be honest with you, like the only position I'd really not want to see them go, I mean, I don't know if they'll go quarterback, obviously. And then other than that is running back. If they take any other position there, I'm okay with it. Linebacker too, maybe, unless there's a linebacker they like really like. I don't think it's a big need or there's a guy that'll be there. But like, hey, if somehow Trey McBride falls there, I would love Trey McBride and George Kittle and 2 tight end sets. If there's a receiver they really like that falls there, hey, I would totally be on board with them making that move and making this passing attack more dynamic. If there's a safety they like, a corner they like, it really just is linebacker and like running back are the 2 positions that like aren't obvious that they won't take, that like I'm like no thanks, like I don't really want that. I'll come back to this because I think it's going to be, I think Malik Willis will be the first QB taken, but I don't think it's going to, I'll tell you this, it'll be Malik Willis and it'll be a team trading up. It will be a team that's not selecting from the spot they're currently slotted in now. Travis Homer is the best player on Seattle now, by the way, pal. So I hate to break it to you, but Travis Homer is the best player on your team now. Apparently that stadium for the Bills is open air in grass field. Yeah, it's too much of their culture. I don't see them getting a dome. So that's pretty cool. Malik Willis to New Orleans. That's an interesting one. Trey Sermon coming for blood this upcoming season. Hey, he might shock a lot of doubters and come in and have a fantastic season. But yeah, we've had some great questions. So again, if you guys have anything else, please let me know now. Otherwise, we'll probably cut it down. Like I said, we talked for an hour, 20 minutes or so. It's been fun. We'll be talking about Jimmy, talking about some other stuff. But again, I'm going to be doing one again tomorrow. I have something really cool I'm working on for Wednesday that I'll hopefully be able to share with you guys as soon as I complete that. I know 49ers fans will get a kick out of it, but it's something that I'm looking forward to. But other than that, I think I'll probably wrap this up, man, because again, otherwise I'll sit here. I don't know if you guys saw, some of you that were here, I did a 5-hour stream on Saturday that was supposed to be like 30 minutes where I'm like, I'm just going to hop on real quick, get some, reps in, get some questions in. We'll have some fun, go. Stayed on for 5 hours. Sunday night, I was like, okay, I'm going to do a quick one again for like an hour or so. Ended up going for like 2.5 hours. So I have so much fun sitting here talking with you guys, seeing thoughts in the comments and all that if I don't physically remove myself, then I will just sit here for hours doing this. So I'll get to the last couple here. Again, if you guys have any last questions, please get them in. Otherwise, I'm probably going to have to take off, get some dinner going, and do some stuff I got to do around my apartment. But it's been super fun. Let me get to these last couple, though. Sermon has been putting in some work. He looks like a guy that's on a mission. I would say like slim to none, unless there's a corner that, like if Sauce Gardner's there, I could definitely see Seattle taking him. But just the way John and Pete are, I would expect them to trade back and trade back and trade back and just really accumulate a lot of assets. And I can't fault them for doing that. That's probably what I would do if I was them as well. Let's see. I think that if you're talking about Calais Campbell, I'm assuming Calais Campbell and Jordan Hicks. I don't know if they really have a need for Hicks, but Calais Campbell would be really interesting. I've always been a big fan of him. If you got him and Armstead on the same line, that would be quite a sight to behold. He is a massive human being, and I think he still has a lot left in the tank, at least enough to offer in a rotational role where you may not have to have him out there every down. Akeem Hicks. Okay. Possibly. I don't think that they're going to really aggressively sign a big name D-line guy at this point. I think they have 11 signed on the roster already. I think they'll draft a player or two as well, maybe add an undrafted free agent. So I would be surprised if they do. Campbell makes a little bit more sense than Hicks to me, because I think he's somebody that would sign for a little bit less money. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I just think they're kind of done with the defensive line at this point in time, to be honest. Dawson, thank you so much. If you ever want to come on, I would love to have you on, dude, and we could have some fun. We could work through it. You're always welcome to come on if you want to join. So just throwing that out there. And any way I can help you, I would be more than happy to assist with, man. Like I said, if you want to come on, we'll talk LSU. We could talk 49ers, whatever you want to do, man. We'll have a fun time. You're always welcome. No, I don't think so. I think that nobody is really a lock on the last 4 or 5 spots on that roster, and that's what makes that D-line group so enticing. It's very competitive. It doesn't say it's not an indictment on Kerry Hyder. It's a indication that defensive line group is really good and it's really deep, and that they're going to have some tough decisions to make, as they seem to every year. Because when you start seeing these guys, that's by far the most fun group to watch during training camp, dude. When you watch Chris Kocurek and that defensive line group working, man, it is an absolute joy. So I think that was the last one. Barring anything else, I am going to go ahead and probably call it, man. If you guys have any last minute things, get them in quick, please. Real quick, I will talk about this. Yes, absolutely. I liked it too. And Brad is awesome. He's out here just, casually, he was supposed to do a show with Jason that day. Jason couldn't make it. And he's just like, oh, let me just casually bring in a starting 49ers defensive lineman and just, pencil him in where you normally would be. Yeah, thank you guys for coming. I didn't know Jason and Andrew were live right now. So if they are, definitely get over there. Go check out Sprint Right Option. Love those guys. They do fantastic stuff. If you're subscribed to me, you're probably already subscribed to him and Andrew. So I appreciate you guys staying with me. Head on over there. Go check out what they're doing at Sprint Right Option. Steve, yes, when we start talking NFC West stuff, I would love to have you on. Or we can start talking about the Pistons' potential dynasty with Cade Cunningham and Paolo Banchero. So we'll get around to that. So I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Mark, thank you guys for coming by. Nicholas, Shardall, Dawson, TJ, everybody who's been in here, Jesus, BSE, anybody who's still in here, appreciate you guys staying. Again, I'll be back tomorrow talking about something. I'm going to try to do these every day until people are like, stop it, dude. We're sick of this. We're sick of hearing your voice. So I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep doing these. Head on over to Sprint Right Option. Jason and Andrew are doing a show right now, apparently, and it's fantastic. I'm not even watching it, and I can tell you it's fantastic. I'm going to be heading over there to go check out what those guys are doing too. So thank you guys so much. Have a good night.